Hey everybody, hope all is well. We're continuing the Indisputable Truth book series. So we've covered a lot of ground so far. We're in the third edition of the book. We're on page 55, and we are trying to, go through the proofs of how do you know whether or not God, not that just God exists. We already got through that, but how do you know that Judaism is true? How do you know the Torah is from God? And we made a very simple assumption that when a book claims to be from God, you have to see information in that book that only God can know at the time when it was written. So we went through so many different types of proofs, so many different types of compelling evidence showing you how the Torah must be from God, that no way a human being could have made it up, and it has to be, from the creator of the universe. And we said a book that has mistakes shows that it's not from God, and a book that has, divine evidence that only God can know, like it tells future events, it has crazy scientific facts that no one could have known when it was written, only God could have known, right? That's how you know that the book must be from God. So we are on this section of prophetic proofs, and we gave so many amazing prophetic proofs of the Torah. We talked about the idea of, Megillat, the proof of Megillat Esther, the idea that the Torah predicted, the Nuremberg trials and everything, and talked about that. Now we're on a very, very beautiful proof, which is probably going to take the rest of this class time, and it's called the 7 Wonders of Jewish History. So one of my favorite proofs, and really the proof is just a prediction the Torah made about the future of, the Torah made crazy prediction that no human being in the world could have made. If someone was making up the Torah, couldn't have been made up. And again, this is another proof of the many proofs that we're going to go through that show you that the Torah has to be given by God. No way a human being could have written it. So let's begin. So the 7 wonders of Jewish history. What ancient human or group of humans could or would have put in their book a bunch of predictions that are highly unusual, inconsistent, and or supernatural? ? And even more outstanding is, how is it that every single one of these unusual, contradictory, and or supernatural predictions have, over the course of history, actually happened? In this proof, we will see the supernatural history of the Jewish people, which was somehow all predicted thousands of years ago. Just imagine the possibility of human authors sitting around thousands of years ago thinking, thinking that to write in their guidebook, don't kill, don't steal. Sounds good to me. However, when one reads the Torah in some depth, when one reads the Torah in some depth, one finds that apart from these basic precepts, it contains some pretty remarkable claims. Consider the following absolutely unique supernatural history of the Jewish people, which is all predicted in the Torah, and then decide for yourselves whether this could have possibly have been predicted and written by humans. So we're going to go through the 7 wonders of Jewish history that show you the Torah had to be given from God. So let's go to wonder number 1. The Jewish people are eternal. In Genesis chapter 17, verse 7, God promises Abraham that the Jewish people will be eternal. God says, and I'm going to start the quote, "And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout the generations, an eternal covenant to be your God and the God of your descendants after you." Now we all know that treaties are only as good as the two sides who keep up their part of the bargain. If one party bails out, the treaty is void. What will happen if the Jews don't keep their covenant with God? So God said, I'm going to make a covenant. I'm going to make a promise between you guys. We're making a business deal in a sense, right? And obviously it's only as good as the Jews keep it. So what happens if the Jews don't keep it? Consider this prophecy. It says in Leviticus 26, verses 44 through 45. Okay, so starting the quote. "Yet even so, even while they're in the land of their enemies, I will not reject or spurn them, lest I break my covenant with them by destroying them. For I am their God. I will remember them because of the covenant I made with their forefathers, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt before the eyes of the nations, to be a God to them." In other words, even when things go sour, even when the Jewish people stop following the Torah, the covenant will not be breached. God promises that this relationship will exist forever. This is a very strange prediction. Nations rise and fall. They don't exist forever. Do you know any Edomites personally? Anyone have a good friend who's a Moabite? history has seen the rise of many powerful civilizations: the Persians, the Greeks, the Babylonians, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Romans, but they've long since disappeared. Why would the Torah predict eternal survival for the Jewish people? Even more strange, how is it that the Jews, a nation which began about 3,800 years ago, much older than the Persians, Greeks, etc., are still around? Meaning how the Torah is making a promise that the Jewish people will always be here. Okay? And now, how can the Torah make a promise like that when we see even there's nations who, for example, the Persians, the Greeks, the Babylonians, and no, they're not, you don't know who they are anymore. These guys are gone. They're long gone. But the Jews are here. The Torah make that prediction. How can the Torah make such a prediction? How can a human being make a prediction? Yeah, my nation will always be here. When all these other nations that the Torah, again, they came after the Torah, um, how did the Torah make such a prediction? Okay, fine. So let's continue reading. Reading it from the computer instead of from the actual book because I left my book at home. I left my book somewhere else. So let's see here. Okay, so many people have noticed this strange phenomenon. One of the most famous is Mark Twain, who wrote an essay called Concerning the Jews at the end of the 19th century. Okay, so, he writes the Egyptian. Okay, so I'm quoting Mark Twain in his book. You could find it on the complete essays of Mark Twain, page 249. Okay, so I'm reading a claim right now from Mark Twain of showing, we basically said, just to repeat it, we said, how did the Jews, survive for thousands of years? Like, how can someone make a prediction that a nation will always be here? How can I, the Romans, the Greeks, the Babylonians, they're all gone, okay, the Jews are still here, but how can the Torah make a prediction the Jews will always be eternal nation? And I said that many people have noticed this strange phenomenon. One of the most famous is Mark Twain, who wrote an essay called Concerning the Jews at the end of the 19th century. And okay, he writes, okay, so let's read it in. I'm quoting Mark Twain. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed, made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up, held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in the twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jew. All forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Again, Mark Twain, he's studying history, and Mark Twain's basically saying, how the heck are the Jewish people still here today? What keeps the Jew going? How are all these nations gone? Every single nation is done. They're not here anymore. We don't know who the Romans are. Go find me a Roman, right? Not the Romans who live now in Europe. Those are not the same Romans that we're talking about, right? Where are the Romans? Where are the Greeks? Where are the Babylonians? No one knows of them. They're done. They assimilated. They intermarried. And they all got mixed up. The nations. We don't know who's who. But the Jew is still here. And again, even Mark Twain, he's noticing it. So that's Mark Twain on the Jewish people's, the fact that the Jewish people are an eternal nation. Okay, fine. There's another author. His name is Leo Tolstoy. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's a believing Christian who also wondered about the miracle of Jewish survival. He writes, and I'm quoting him right now, "The Jew is the emblem of eternity. He whom neither slaughter nor torture of thousands of years could destroy. He whom neither fire nor sword nor inquisition was able to wipe off the face of the earth. He was the first to produce the oracle of God. He who has been so long the guardian of prophecy and who transmitted it to the rest of the world. Such a nation cannot be destroyed. The Jew is everlasting as eternity itself." Excuse me. So we see here what? To continue reading the book, that's the end of the quote. Somehow, in its collective consciousness, the world has noticed that we Jews are always around. How do we understand this? Paul Johnson, a non-Jewish historian, wrote a bestseller called The History of the Jews. At the end of the book, he gives us a thesis as to why the Jews have survived so long. This is his thesis. This is Paul Johnson's thesis for Jewish, the eternality of the eternal nation of why the Jewish people are eternal. He says, I'm quoting, Paul Johnson. He wrote, "The Jews believed that they were a special people, and with such unanimity and passion, over so long of a span of time, they became one." Meaning what? In other words, he felt that our survival was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Does it make sense to you? Is it possible to will oneself into eternity? And only the Jews did it. All the other nations thought, nah, that's okay. We've gone on long enough. Suppose it's about time to get conquered and become extinct. If the Jews did believe that they were an eternal people, does simply believing something make it so? If I just believe that that I'm a doctor, will I eventually become one? Obviously, things don't work that way. Nations don't will themselves into destruction. Neither do they will themselves into becoming eternal. The only answer to the continued existence of the Jewish nation is the fulfillment of God's promise that we will be an eternal nation that God told Abraham. Okay, so now that was like the introduction to all the proofs. That was wonder number one. Now we're on wonder number two. But in wonder number two, it's in a subsection called the part one, which we call the 3 negative predictions made by the Torah. So one number two, exile and disperse. So have in mind, God made the prediction in the Torah. The Torah says again that the Jews will always be eternal. So now let's see the negative predictions that go against that idea of the Jews being eternal and always existing. Okay, the same Torah that says the Jews are going to be eternal is the same Torah that is going to say a couple crazy things. Okay, meaning crazy in the sense of like crazy predictions. Okay, wonder number two, exiled and dispersed. The Torah says that we will enter the land of Israel, but then after not following the Torah, Hashem. Okay, so I'm quoting Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 64. It says, I'm quoting it now, Hashem will scatter you among all the nations from one end of the earth to the other. Far from having a strong and consistent homeland, the Jewish people were exiled twice from their land. First, after Solomon's temple was destroyed in 586 BCE, and second, after Herod's temple, we call it Herod's temple, was destroyed in the year 770 CE. I'm reading the footnote here, footnote 107 in the third edition of the book. An earlier example of Jewish dispersal is the conquest of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrians in 722 BCE, when the 10 tribes of northern kingdoms were exiled from the land and became the 10 lost tribes. Okay, fine. So let me read this back. We see throughout history that the natural consequence of being conquered is assimilation. Let me repeat that. We see throughout history that the natural consequence of being conquered is assimilation into the conquering power's culture. This applies even more so after exile from the land completely. So, for centuries, Jews were expelled from many countries, such as England in 1290, Spain in 1492, Portugal in 1496, and the Jews never had a stable homeland. We became the wandering Jews, dispersed all over the world. The vast majority of Jews today do not even live in the same country in which their grandparents or great-grandparents were born, which is crazy. For much of our history, most Jews have never set foot in Israel. The striking fact is that the Jewish prediction of dispersal came true. It is very difficult to think that some human authors would make this claim. Yeah, we are going to go into the promised land, and then we'll mess up and get kicked out. What other religion makes claims against themselves like that? We see that this prediction goes against human logic to write such a thing. Extraordinary, because why would humans think this would happen? And this goes against the eternal nation claim. So again, the Torah is making the prediction that you're going to be an eternal nation. But now it's also making the same predictions that's going to go against the claim of being an eternal nation. Meaning what? You're going to be eternal and you're going to always be here, but I'm going to put you in an environment where you're going to be basically, dispersed and very likely to assimilate. But still, we still didn't assimilate, and we're still here today, right? Again, a crazy negative prediction going against the eternal nation claim. But again, which shows you that whoever's writing the Torah, he's not just, playing around. Nobody making up a book will ever say something like that. Obviously, it has to be from the Creator. So wonder number three. So wonder number one is eternal nation. Wonder number two is the idea that the Torah predicts that we're going to be exiled and dispersed. Okay, and that came true. So the eternal nation came true. The exile and dispersed came true. And wonder number 3 is few in number. The Torah says you will be left few in number. Okay, so let me go take it back. I'm reading. Let's see, Deuteronomy. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 62. So the Torah says, you will be left, I'm quoting the Torah, the Jewish Bible. You will be left few in number. Instead of being like the stars in the heavens in abundance, for you have not hearkened to Hashem, your God. So the Torah is basically telling us that because the Jews didn't listen to God, you're going to be low in numbers. You're not going to be hundreds of millions of Jews like there should be. You're only going to be, in a much lower number. So this is especially remarkable considering that one of the first commandments in the Torah is to be fruitful and multiply. And an ancient people with a high birth rate should mean huge numbers. We know that the average birth rate in modern America is 1.7 children per family. In comparison, the average birth rate of children in the Orthodox Jewish families is on average 6 children. If we, the Jewish nation, began 3,300 years ago, then according to the natural course of history, we should be in the hundreds of millions by now. One of the biggest nations in the world. Yet we are far from that. We make up only 0.02% of the world's population. Who would make a prediction about their own nation that there would be so few in number when logic would dictate otherwise? People say that is because of mass persecution that we've been remain few in number. However, after the Holocaust, around 1945, the world's population has gone up by 3.5 times. If that is the case, it would mean that we should have gone from about 11 million Jews at the end of the Holocaust to about 39 million Jews in the world today. And we know that this isn't the case. Far from even doubling our numbers, there are only around 14.7 million Jews in the world today, even given our overall high birth rate. Historically speaking, throughout the generations, we lost 90 to 95% of our nation. We keep diminishing and diminishing, yet we're still bouncing up and down, barely hanging on at the bottom of the graph. Demographically, we should just pack it in. Why don't we? Because the Torah says in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 27, I'm quoting the Torah, and you shall remain few in number among the nations to which God shall lead you. Despite the fact that our tiny size would almost guarantee the failure of the prophecy of an eternal nation, the Torah predicts precisely this. Yes, you'll be persecuted. Yes, many of you will be wiped out, but you will survive. The Torah tells us, I think this is in Deuteronomy, doesn't quote the verse here, but the Torah tells us, Zechor yemot olam. Keep your eyes on history. And when you do, you begin to perceive that something or someone is pulling the strings. It doesn't matter if the world hates you, persecutes you, or scatters you throughout the globe. Somehow, you're going to remain with your identity intact, even if you're the tiniest nation in existence. So guys, that was, the third wonder of Jewish history. We have to finish right now. I got to go. But the idea is we're going to continue the next class. We're going to continue wonder number 4, persecution, anti-Semitism, and other predictions that the Torah made. But just to summarize what we said so far, the Torah is giving us crazy prediction that no human being, if I'm making up a book, I'll never write that about my nation. If I'm creating a new religion, I'm not going to write that the religion, even if I write there, my nation's still going to be there, when that obviously we see historically that hasn't happened to all these nations. They don't survive. But I'm never going to write, not only are they going to be eternal and always exist, but they're going to be small in number. And I'm going to write that, not only are they going to be small in number, but they're going to be, exiled and dispersed, because those are recipes for a disaster. Those are recipes for not an eternal nation. Those are recipes for a nation to get wiped out. But even though the Torah is giving those predictions, the Torah, again, where the Jews are still here today. Again, another amazing proof. And we'll continue the rest of the proofs. They all fit together. So whoever's watching this, please just continue to the next video to see what I'm talking about, the continuation, because they all go together. And obviously, if you just watch this and you don't watch the rest, it's gonna not connect the whole thing. There's 7 wonders, not 4. But that's the idea, and we'll finish with there. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.